Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guests, Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray, and they're here to share with us their new novel, A Pair of Aces. So what happens when a fearless prosecutor and a notorious madam join forces to take down the most dangerous mob boss in 1930s New York? Well, today's guests are going to dive into just that. Marie Benedict is a graduate of Boston College and the Boston University School of Law. She's a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author. Victoria Christopher Murray is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of more than 30 novels. So welcome to the show, Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks so much. We're happy to be here chatting about it.
Well, what an honor it is to have the both of you here to talk about this book. So what inspired you, especially together, to write this book?
Well, I think, this is Victoria and I's third collaboration, which is so exciting. And with each of our books, obviously our mission is to uncover crucial women from the past and share their legacies. But because we collaborate as a white and a Black woman, we collaborate on issues around race, historical issues around race. We want to tackle something new each time. And this time we were really interested in exploring the theme of two women from different worlds coming together to effectuate great change. And when I first came across Eunice Carter, who's one of our two heroines, who was the very first Black female prosecutor in New York City in the 1930s, and we started to learn about the role she played in creating the most successful case against the great mobster of her age, Lucky Luciano, we knew we had something.
Well, what a remarkable piece of history. So can you share, I know you kind of dove into that a little bit, but can you share, that's okay. Can you share a little bit about the book without giving us any spoilers?
Well, as Marie already said, it's about these two women who've come together to effect change. One is Eunice Carter, who, as Marie said, was the very first Black female prosecutor in New York City. And as she built this case against Lucky Luciano, she had some help. She needed to have some help in the inside, in order to get the information and the evidence that she needed. And we believe the woman was Polly Adler, who was a Russian immigrant who had her own amazing history as to how she rose in New York. But she was the most notorious madam in New York at that time. And so you have two women, one Black, one white, on opposite sides of the law to come together to build this case against Lucky Luciano.
Oh my goodness. And the story goes on from there. And I love, oh my God, I love that we are just empowering voices from women that otherwise would go unheard. What was the research like for this book?
I mean, I would say fascinating. There's no place I like to be than in the kind of rabbit holes of history. So, as a former litigator myself, I was a New York City lawyer, like Eunice Carter. It was daunting because I had left the law behind, but also really a thrill to kind of follow her in the historical court records to see how the case was built, to see the evidence that was necessary to bring these charges against Lucky Luciano, to see the sort of backlash she faced both within and without the team that she worked with. She was part of a famous team led by Thomas Dewey that was charged with bringing down the mob. And they weren't so excited about bringing a case that utilized mob influence over prostitution at its core. This was a time period when that was considered to be a woman's crime and something that the mob might not involve themselves in. And she proved them wrong. So that part of the history really delving back into the court records, the way the case was built, and then seeing the ways in which Polly, as this most famous madam who would have been really conversant in every aspect of the business and was famous in her own right. She ran, it was more like a club where celebrities, politicians, and mobsters came to gamble, to drink, and to be entertained. And so, kind of following her on her journey and seeing the way in which these two women's realms would have intersected to form this case against Lucky Luciana was really a thrill.
What was it like recreating 1930s New York? That must have been a challenge.
Not so much of a challenge. It's exciting. It was an exciting time, even with the mobsters there.
Yeah.
But that's part of our research as well, to delve into what was the world like in 1932 or whatever year we're working with. So we make sure that we have the little details. I think it's the details that make up historical fiction, to put the reader in the city. So, from the sound of the cars to the kind of uniforms that the police were wearing or the school uniforms that the children were wearing, we put the reader right there into the time period of whatever book we're writing.
This was a time of great change and unrest in New York City, and really in the world in general. This interwar period, but particularly in New York, you have exciting things like the rise of these great Art Deco skyscrapers. You have these incredible Harlem jazz clubs. You have wonderful cultural kind of innovations coming along. But then you have the Great Depression. You have great poverty, great unemployment. You have great segregation, even though it's the
Yeah,
North. It's still very
yeah.
much the time of Jim Crow. So you're dealing with all these forces, and that kind of chaos lent itself to the mob kind of sinking its teeth in and getting a foothold in all these different aspects of the city. So it's wonderful and overwhelming at the same time to recreate that time period, but so important because we can't really understand where we are today unless we understand where we came from.
Oh, isn't that the truth? And you both were so masterfully brought the 1930s in this book in a way that readers are feeling, at least I did, that we are there.
Right there.
Yeah,
That's our goal, to always put the reader there. That's one of the very first things I learned as a writer from my first editor.
well, you guys did a great job.
Thank you.
What are some of the challenges that women face during that time that I think readers today and young women today would not even know about?
I mean, there's so many things. We have a laundry list that we could go through. I think for me, one of the things that really was a little bit gobsmacking, as a former lawyer, there was actually an entire court system. It was called the women's courts. And those courts were specifically designed to handle what were considered women's crimes and women's issues. So things like custody, things like prostitution, things like divorce, all these things which actually involve both men and women, but were considered to be exclusively things that women should have kind of assigned to and should be addressing. And so, having worked in a legal system that obviously that was not part of anymore when I first started practicing law in New York, it really gave you a sense of just how women were perceived historically, the way in which we have grown from that time period, but also the similarity between the
Yeah.
headlines then and the headlines now really shows you the way in which things haven't changed. And so that's always a really powerful moment when we're doing these sort of stories.
I think the one thing that I noticed was like what Marie just ended on, the parallels. Every time I'm doing historical fiction, you're thinking 100 years ago, but the parallels to today, how women back then were often overlooked or dismissed, how most of the time they were the only woman in the room, those kinds of things. And that it's so interesting to see that the more things change, because it would be disingenuous to say we haven't made any progress, the more things remain the same.
There's so many rooms that women weren't allowed in, and it feels a little bit like that today in some ways. So,
Sure does.
Yes.
so how did this partnership between the two of you shape this novel, and how did you collaborate together to write this book? I would think that that would be a challenge.
Well, I think it all started with some of our very first conversations on our first book, The Personal Librarian. Victoria and I hadn't known each other when we started that collaboration. I had come across Belle DeCosta Green, the heroine of that story, some actually decades before, and she'd always kind of been a female character, historical figure of interest to me. And when I learned that she was actually a Black woman passing as white, I really believed strongly that I wanted to have a Black author tell the story with me. And during those first conversations, we're sort of feeling, and I'd read a book of Victoria's that I really, I thought, wow, this would be maybe could be a good match. Our first conversations, it was very apparent that we would be able to collaborate because our goals were the same. Our goals were to tell not just the best story possible, the most propulsive, the most page turning for the reader, but we also had the primary goal of honoring these women, right? Of really celebrating their legacies, not making them perfect because they weren't perfect. And in fact, sometimes our biggest flaws are our most important qualities, right? The ones that really help us grow. But in having that kind of as our guiding light, it really shapes everything we do about our collaboration.
Yes, and I often say that Marie is my writing soulmate because, like you said, it's hard to collaborate with people when you have, but not with Marie, because we have the same goal, as she said, to always write the best story. So we don't even have disagreements because people are always asking about disagreements. We do have situations where we're on opposite sides of a question, but it's so easy for us to come together because we talk it out, learn something in the process, and end up in the same place. It's a wonderful thing to have a partner that you can wrestle with and have all of your questions answered as you go through it together.
Well, I thought A Pair of Aces was such a great read. Marie and Victoria, where can readers connect with you and be part of your community?
So you can find me anywhere online, mostly on Facebook, Instagram and Substack. And I'm always under Victoria Christopher Murray. Always.
And the same with me. You can find me at my website, Facebook, Instagram, author Marie Benedict. And Victoria and I both love to engage with readers. And there's going to hopefully be tons of opportunities to do that with A Pair of Aces.
Well, Marie and Victoria, thank you both so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much for having
much.
us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new novel, A Pair of Aces. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.